Before her voice captured the world, Dolores O'Riordan once admitted she never thought she'd live long. A small-town girl from rural Ireland, with a voice like an angel, yet carrying the dark memories of years of pain no one else could truly understand. She became the voice of a generation with the Cranberries, singing of peace, of loss, while she herself was trapped in a private battle with depression, anxiety, and secrets she never fully revealed. Fans saw the smiles. Friends saw a woman utterly exhausted. On January 15th, 2018, she was found in the bathtub of a London hotel. Just hours earlier, she had sent excited messages about a long-awaited reunion. The coroner's report told one story. Those close to her hinted at another. Between those two moments lies a void no one has yet filled. Was it truly an accident? Or did someone ensure that voice would never rise again? Chapter 1. An angelic childhood with a secret no one dared to speak. In a small Irish village, an angelic voice rose from a childhood hiding a secret no one dared to mention. She was born in Ballybricken, the youngest in a large family. Some say there were 7 children. Others insist there were 9. 2 of them died young. But the baptism records list only 6 names. No one ever explained why. Her father, Terence, suffered a severe brain injury in a motorcycle accident before she was born. He was unable to work. Her mother, Eileen, carried the full burden, raising the children in hardship. Music was her rare escape. Dolores sang at church services, her voice able to silence the entire room. But no one knew that after every performance, she returned to a fear no child should ever endure. Years later, when fame had found her, she revealed that between the ages of 8 and 12, she had been abused by someone the family knew. No one knew. No one suspected. In that small, strict, and tightly closed community, such a thing could not be spoken aloud. She stayed silent. She lived as if she were the one at fault. That fear seeped into every day. At school, she sat in the back of the classroom, avoiding every glance. When someone approached, her body tensed. At night, she lay awake, imagining footsteps coming closer to her bed. A friend once recalled, "She said once that she wouldn't live long." Her voice was calm, like she was talking about the weather. At the time, no one thought much of it. But later, they realized it was the voice of a child who believed her childhood was a sentence she could never escape. She sought refuge in music, not because she dreamed of becoming a singer, but because it was the only way to turn the unspeakable into sound. Her first melodies weren't about love. They were about fear and the longing to disappear. One winter evening, while her mother was cooking, Dolores said, "I'm going to sing for the whole world." Her mother thought it was just a child's dream. But for Dolores, it was a plan to leave everything behind: the village, the familiar faces, and the darkness that came with them. Those years left her with 2 things: a voice that could make a stranger stop in their tracks, and a wound that would never heal. Both would follow her for life, lifting her up and pulling her down in equal measure. And then came the first chance to make good on her promise to leave Ballybricken, a small audition in the city, armed with nothing but a demo tape and an old keyboard. Dolores didn't know that stepping through that door would lead her straight into the spotlight and into a new spiral of pressure and loneliness. Chapter 2. From an angelic voice to the weight behind the spotlight. In 1990, at just 19 years old, she left Ballybricken with nothing more than a keyboard and a cassette tape. On that tape were a handful of her own songs, raw, unpolished, but unlike anything else. That was all she brought to the audition for a small local band, then called The Cranberries Saw Us. Dolores walked into the room, set the keyboard on the table, and began to sing. Just a few lines in, the band fell silent. Guitarist Noel Hogan would later recall, "We knew this was the voice we'd been looking for." They renamed themselves the Cranberries and began writing together. Linger was born in those early days, a fragile, haunting love song. When it hit the airwaves, it spread across radios throughout America, turning an unknown Irish group into a sensation. But it was Zombie that struck like thunder. Dolores wrote it after the 1993 Warrington bombing that claimed the lives of 2 young boys. Gone were the gentle melodies. Zombie was a cry, angry, aching, unforgettable. On MTV, her image, draped in gold paint, became one of the defining visuals of the 90s. Audiences saw a fearless young woman giving voice to a nation's grief. Inside, she was still the girl carrying wounds from childhood, never entirely certain of her own safety. The relentless touring schedule, dozens of cities, hotel rooms that all looked the same, began to wear her down. One sound engineer remembered, "One night after a show, she didn't come to dinner with the rest of us. She locked herself in her room, stood by the window for hours. When I knocked, she just said, 'I'm tired.'" The press only added to the strain. Headlines constantly compared her to Sinead O'Connor, another Irish icon, as if every female singer had to both match and surpass that image. Dolores rarely spoke about it, but those close to her knew it bothered her deeply. During this time, she began writing more about family. "Ode to My Family" carried lines that were tender yet aching, as though she were speaking directly to her younger self. But the peak of her career also marked the first visible cracks. The endless work, the long stretches away from home, and the loneliness no one else could see began to build. A fellow musician once said, "Sometimes it felt like she was running away from something, not toward success." It was the kind of success most people dream of, but for Dolores, the spotlight only illuminated half of who she was. The other half remained in the shadows, where old memories returned without warning, sharp as a cold wind. Then, during one of those long tours, Dolores met Don Burton, tour manager for Duran Duran. Somewhere between sold-out arenas and quiet hotel nights, a romance began. She believed this might be the safe harbor she had never known. But could love truly fill the emptiness that had been there since childhood? Or would it only mask the cracks that were quietly spreading beneath the surface? Chapter 3: Love, Marriage, and the Cracks No One Could See. Amid the grandest stages in the world, Dolores believed she had found the safest place in her life. Yet even there, the first cracks quietly began to appear. She met Don Burton, tour manager for Duran Duran, during the long stretches of international touring. He was calm, steady, and could make her laugh even in her most exhausted moments. In 1994, they married at Holy Cross Abbey. The press called it the fairy tale wedding of a rock star. They left Ireland and settled on a sprawling lakeside farm in Ontario, Canada. Life there seemed peaceful. Flowers, horses, and 3 children. In the few rare photographs, Dolores wore thick sweaters and a radiant smile. But friends say that smile was not always real. Distance from constant travel began to seep into the marriage. When Don was away, Dolores grew quieter, often pouring herself a drink as evening fell. A relative remembered, She said it helped her sleep, but I noticed the glass was fuller every day. In 2014, the marriage ended. The headlines read simply, "Divorce after 20 years together." But friends revealed that in those final months, she hardly slept and wrote dozens of letters she never sent. No one knows what she wrote in them. Soon after, Dolores was in the news again, this time for an unusual incident. On a flight from New York to Ireland, she suddenly began shouting, clashing with flight attendants and police upon landing. A crew member claimed she yelled something no one could clearly understand. Police noted in their report that her gaze was unfocused. But only she knew what was in her luggage that day. The court ordered her to pay a fine and issue an apology. Her lawyer stated she was undergoing treatment for mental illness and needed rest. Dolores spent 3 weeks in a psychiatric hospital. When she was discharged, she told reporters she was fine. Yet one journalist who met her later said she smiled, but her eyes didn't. Her eyes looked like they were focused on somewhere far away. The years that had seemed like a stable family life turned out to be a shell. Inside, the things she had been running from since childhood had been waiting, and now, after her home had fallen apart, there was nothing to hold them back. On stage, Dolores's voice was still powerful. But when she sang Ode to My Family after the divorce, one longtime fan wrote, "I no longer heard pride in that song, only sadness." She returned to the Cranberries, recording and planning a new tour. She called it a fresh start. But then came a revelation that left fans stunned. Dolores disclosed that she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had once considered ending her life. Those words marked the start of a new chapter, one where old wounds blended with the new pressures of returning to the spotlight. And from here, Dolores would enter the most fragile stage of her life. Chapter 4: A Brilliant Career and a Widening Void. When Dolores revealed she had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, many fans were stunned. They had always seen her as strong and full of energy on stage, but few knew about the violent swings in her moods, soaring highs followed by crushing lows. She spoke of sleepless nights, her thoughts spinning endlessly as if trapped in a small, locked room. In the mornings, when she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. And once, she admitted she had stood at the edge of ending it all. Still, Dolores returned to the Cranberries. They recorded a new album and scheduled a tour. She called it a new chapter, a way to stand again after years of feeling lost. But the most observant fans noticed, on stage, her eyes were no longer the same. The voice was still there, but now it carried a weight that was hard to put into words. One tour manager recalled, "Some days she was buzzing, talking endlessly about future plans. The next day, she'd vanish. No calls answered, no messages returned. Chronic back pain, the result of years of relentless performing, made things worse." In May of 2017, the Cranberries canceled the rest of their tour, citing Dolores's health. She admitted she was exhausted, both physically and mentally. In rare interviews, she tried to appear optimistic. She would smile softly, talk about the future, but in between her answers, her gaze would drift far away. One journalist remembered, she would stop speaking for a few seconds, then change the subject entirely. Toward the end of 2017, Dolores began working on new projects, collaborating with the band DARK and discussing a re-recording of Zombie with an American rock group called Bad Wolves. Friends said she seemed excited. But in between those bursts of enthusiasm came sleepless nights, heavier drinking, and late-night messages sent at odd hours. A close friend in Limerick recalled, "She told me she was going to be fine. But the next day, she'd text saying there were days she didn't want to get out of bed." As the start of 2018 approached, things became increasingly unpredictable. To outsiders, she could appear perfectly normal, but those closest to her knew a single missed call, a canceled meeting, could send her into days of silence. Then a new opportunity came. Dolores would fly to London to record vocals for the new version of Zombie. It was a project she said she was looking forward to more than anything. Yet just hours before that recording session, she called a friend, her voice bright and cheerful. And only a few hours later, she was found in the bathtub of her hotel. What happened in the space between those two moments? A woman brimming with plans and a motionless body in cold water. Chapter 5. The Final Night in London and the Unanswered Questions. On January 14th, 2018, Dolores arrived in London for a short but important trip. She was scheduled to record vocals for a cover of Zombie with the American band Bad Wolves, a project she had told many people she was truly excited about. That evening, she stayed at the Hilton Park Lane. Friends received a few brief messages from her. Just arrived, ready for tomorrow. No one noticed anything unusual. Around midnight, she left a voicemail for longtime friend Dan Waite, who was also an executive at 11/7. Her voice was clear, upbeat. "I really like the new arrangement of Zombie. See you in the morning." It would be the last time anyone heard her voice. On the morning of January 15th, hotel staff entered her room after she failed to answer calls. They found her in the bathtub, wearing pajamas. The water was cold. She was gone. The coroner's report listed 5 empty mini bottles of liquor and 1 open bottle of champagne in the room. Her blood alcohol level was high, and prescription medications were present at therapeutic levels. No injuries, no suicide note. A front desk staff member later told reporters, the night before, she walked through the lobby wearing a wool hat, no makeup, just a faint smile when someone greeted her. No one imagined that hours later, police would seal off the entire hotel floor. Police records stated the door was locked from the inside, with no signs of struggle. Yet what puzzled some was that no one knew exactly what she did between the midnight call and the moment she was found. No cameras, no witnesses. A friend in London remarked, "Dolores wasn't the kind to drink heavily before a recording session. She treated a session like a marathon. You had to be at your sharpest." Yet the amount of alcohol that night suggested otherwise. And then there was another detail. In her suitcase, police found several notebooks. Some pages were filled with writing. Others contained only a few words, then nothing. Their full contents have never been made public. The official cause was ruled accidental drowning due to alcohol intoxication. But for those who knew Dolores, it was hard to accept. She was in a period of creative momentum, preparing for an important recording, and had expressed excitement just hours earlier. If it was truly an accident, why did it happen on the very night before such a milestone? And if it wasn't, what really took place in that room? Those questions would haunt her friends, her fans, and the members of the Cranberries for years to come. And from the unfinished recordings she left behind, the band would piece together one final farewell, an album titled In the End, like a closing note to a journey filled with both triumph and loss. Chapter 6: A Farewell Album and an Unfinished Legacy. The news of Dolores's passing shook the world, but the greatest shock came to the 3 remaining members of the Cranberries. In the band's archives, they found a collection of unfinished recordings she had left behind. The vocals were raw, sometimes breaking, breaths audible between lines, yet each note carried an emotion that words could barely capture. These demos were more than music. They felt like fragments of a diary, moments where Dolores laid bare her feelings without fear of judgment. Some songs sounded like a cry for help. Others were gentle, as if she had finally forgiven herself. The 3 friends decided to complete one final album, In the End. They kept her voice untouched, adding only the simplest arrangements to preserve her presence. When it was released in 2019, the album felt like a farewell letter. The title, In the End, read like a premonition, or perhaps an acceptance. The album received a Grammy nomination, but the band announced they would not continue. There can be no Cranberries without Dolores. It was more than an artistic statement. It was their way of keeping her in the place she belonged, as the soul of the band. Outside the group, the American rock band Bad Wolves, who had originally planned to record Zombie with Dolores, released their own cover in tribute. Every cent of the $250,000 it earned was given to her 3 children, a gesture without fanfare, but rich in meaning. Still, amid the tributes, an unshakable silence remained. Many of the pages from Dolores's notebooks found in that London hotel room have never been made public. When asked, Noel Hogan simply said, "Some things belong only to Dolores." In Limerick, a memorial is held each year. Her image is painted on the walls, surrounded by the green of her Irish homeland. But for those who knew her best, the memory is not only of beauty, it is also of a question that remains unanswered. On that final night, did she find peace? Or did she leave while everything was still unfinished? Conclusion: Dolores O'Riordan, a farewell or an accident? Dolores left this world at the age of 46, a time when many artists are only stepping into the most mature and accomplished stage of their careers. From the little girl in Ballybricken who believed she would not live long, to the star who commanded stages across the globe, her journey was both brilliant and shadowed. The light in her life came from the hits, Linger, Dreams, Zombie, songs in which millions found pieces of themselves in every lyric. But the darkness came from wounds no one could see, memories of abuse, endless sleepless nights, and the loneliness of standing in the middle of a cheering crowd. On her final day in London, the coroner's report read, "Alcohol intoxication, accidental drowning in a bathtub." Yet there were gaps that could not be filled. The last phone call to friends, the unopened luggage, and the locked-away pages in her notebooks. Perhaps the truth was simply a single night of lost control. Or perhaps it was the final moment of a soul that had traveled too far and could not find its way back. The only certainty is that she was still making plans for the future, from a long-awaited reunion to new songs, when it all came to an end. Dolores's legacy is not measured in the number of albums or awards. It lives in the way her voice could reach into the hearts of those who had known loss, in how her lyrics became a refuge for those who felt abandoned. And perhaps that is why, each time Zombie plays, we still feel her here, not in a cold London bathtub, but in the moment when music makes us feel a little less alone. The final question still hangs in the air. That night, did Dolores O'Riordan leave us because of an accident? Or did she leave behind a farewell only she could understand?